Wes Streeting versus toxic number 10. Wes Streeting just called Downing Street toxic and juvenile. Keir Starmer had to apologize to his own health secretary for his staff briefing against him, and the Prime Minister's chief of staff is now facing calls from both Labour and Tory MPs to be sacked. Meanwhile, Streeting's making jokes about the traitors and somehow coming out of this whole mess looking like the grown-up in the room. If you thought Westminster couldn't get more chaotic, congratulations, you were spectacularly wrong. So settle in, because we're about to dissect what might be the most spectacular own goal in recent political history, where number 10's attempt to shore up the Prime Minister's position has instead made him look weak, turned his health secretary into a leadership contender, and exposed Downing Street as so dysfunctional that ministers are openly calling it toxic. This is Labour in 2025, and honestly, at this point we should just sell tickets because the entertainment value is through the roof. Right, let's start with what actually went down, because the sequence of events here is genuinely remarkable in its incompetence. Allies of Keir Starmer, presumably people close to him in number 10, decided to brief the press that the Prime Minister would resist any coup attempt and basically dare anyone to try challenging him. The idea was presumably to project strength, to show that Starmer was firmly in control and any potential plotter should think twice before making a move. Except it backfired so spectacularly that you have to wonder if anyone involved has ever done politics before, because instead of looking strong and in control, Starmer now looks paranoid and surrounded by advisors who are actively undermining his cabinet. The briefing didn't shut down the speculation, it amplified it tenfold. It turned what might have been background Westminster gossip into a full-blown crisis that dominated the news cycle and forced the Prime Minister himself to intervene. And the star of this particular show? Wes Streeting, who instead of being cowed by the briefings against him, came out swinging with language that's absolutely devastating. He called Downing Street toxic and juvenile, which are not words you use lightly about the office of the Prime Minister when you're a sitting cabinet minister. That's not gentle criticism, that's a declaration of war wrapped in a smile. The genius of Streeting's approach is that he managed to be both brutal and good-humored at the same time. He made jokes comparing the situation to the Traitors, the BBC show where contestants try to figure out who's secretly working against them, which is both funny and cutting, because that's essentially what's happening here. Cabinet ministers trying to work out which number 10 staffers are briefing against them while pretending to be on their side. It's the traitors, except the prizes are cabinet positions and the consequences are your entire political career. And here's the kicker. Ministers have noted that Streeting's response has actually boosted his leadership prospects. Think about that for a second. Number 10 tried to undermine him, and he's come out of it looking better than he did going in. He's positioned himself as the reasonable adult dealing with petty children, the competent minister being undermined by incompetent advisors, the future leader dealing with a dysfunctional present. It's a masterclass in political judo, taking your opponent's attack and using their momentum against them. By Wednesday, the situation had deteriorated so badly that Keir Starmer was forced to order an investigation into who was behind the briefings. His spokesman even suggested that those responsible could face the sack, which is quite something considering these are people working in the Prime Minister's own office. It's like your right hand investigating your left hand for sabotaging your career. The optics are absolutely terrible. And then suspicion fell on Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's influential chief of staff, who's now facing calls from both Labour and Tory MPs to be removed from his post. When both sides of the political divide are united in thinking your chief of staff needs to go, you know you've got a problem. McSweeney is meant to be the person keeping everything running smoothly, the strategic brain coordinating the government's operations. Instead, he's become the story, accused of creating the toxic environment that's tearing the government apart. A Labour source, speaking to the press, because apparently everyone's briefing everyone now, said this follows a clear pattern of people close to Keir briefing against their own side. They added that it happens all the time, it's self-defeating, and it needs to come to an end. That's an extraordinary admission. A Labour source is essentially confirming that yes, Downing Street has a culture of briefing against cabinet ministers. Yes, it's a pattern, not an isolated incident. And yes, it's completely counterproductive. The phrase "the shoe fits" is particularly pointed. That's a source saying we all know who's responsible, we all know what's been happening, and pretending otherwise is insulting everyone's intelligence. It's a barely veiled accusation that doesn't actually name names, but makes absolutely clear who they're talking about. And the warning that this needs to come to an end now is basically a threat. Sort this out or face the consequences. By Wednesday evening, Starmer was so concerned about the fallout that he personally reached out to Streeting to apologize for the briefings against him. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom had to ring his health secretary and say sorry for his own staff undermining him. Let that sink in for a moment. The person who's supposed to be in charge had to apologize to one of his ministers for not being able to control his own office. That phone call tells you everything you need to know about the power dynamics at play here. Starmer clearly feels he needs to keep Streeting on side, which suggests he sees him as either a genuine threat or a valuable ally he can't afford to lose. Either way, it's the Prime Minister who's making concessions, which is not exactly a position of strength. During PMQ, Starmer tried to draw a line under the whole thing by expressing frustration that Streeting had been singled out. He said any attack on any member of his cabinet is completely unacceptable and insisted he never approved such attacks. He praised Streeting as doing a great job, along with the whole cabinet. It's the kind of statement you make when you're trying to project unity while everyone can see the cracks widening by the minute. But here's the problem with that defense. If Starmer never approved the attacks and finds them unacceptable, then his staff are acting without his knowledge or against his wishes, which means either he doesn't know what's happening in his own office, or he does know and hasn't been able to stop it. Neither option suggests a prime minister in control of his operation. What's particularly damaging about this whole saga is how it's exposed the mechanics of Westminster warfare in a way that makes everyone look bad. The public can now see that government doesn't work the way they might imagine, with ministers and advisors working together toward common goals. Instead, it's factions briefing against each other, anonymous sources spreading rumors, and everyone trying to undermine each other while maintaining a facade of unity. The comparison to the Traitors that Streeting made is actually perfect, because that's exactly what this is. A game where people pretend to be working together while secretly plotting against each other, and the only way to survive is to figure out who's lying before they take you out. Except this isn't entertainment, it's government, and the stakes are public services, economic policy, and the country's future. What makes Streeting's position so interesting is that he's managed to position himself as both inside and outside this mess. He's a senior cabinet minister, absolutely part of the government, but he's also positioned himself as a victim of Number 10's toxic culture rather than a participant in it. He's criticizing the very operation he's part of, which is risky, but seems to be paying off because people are sympathetic to the idea that competent ministers are being undermined by incompetent advisors. The fact that this has boosted his leadership prospects is both predictable and remarkable. Predictable because he's handled the situation well, shown strength under pressure, and demonstrated that he won't be bullied. Remarkable because you'd think being at the center of a briefing war would damage anyone involved, but Streeting's come out of it looking like leadership material, while others look like they're part of the problem.